and art were seen as intertwined.
Yes. Even at this early stage,
Absolutely.
they were an item. And here we get the rather gorgeous logo of Decla.
It's marvellous, isn't it?
The company that made the film.
Indeed.
And one of the intriguing things about this film is it establishes so many motifs and conventions.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully we'll list off most of them as we go.
Sure, that's right, yeah.
One of them is that it's a very early example of an unreliable narrator.
That's right, yes.
Story.
Yes. Yeah.
But the actual story of the story behind the film has subsequently, perhaps ironically, been totally obfuscated by a whole bunch of unreliable narrators.
Virtually everybody involved in the film had a different take on how it was made and how it came about and who did what. Yeah.
So sort of sorting through all that is rather difficult, isn't it?
It's a bit of a minefield, yeah. I mean, you've got certain people saying, oh yes, I was the one that introduced the idea of expressionism into the film, and then you got somebody else flatly contradicting that and saying, no, it was me that came up with that. And so, I think at this late stage, the truth, the absolute truth, is probably going to be very hard to find.
Oh, absolutely. But I think one can make educated
guesses based on the available evidence. Yeah.
The opening scene, which is on its way now that we've had the little cast crawl there. As a matter of fact, we've got some credits now, haven't we?
We have. We've got some of those unreliable narrators are going to be name checked as we go along in the next few seconds.
Well, we get to the first act. It's a film in six acts.
That's right.
And we get this remarkably eerie and chilly opening, don't we? In a kind of semicircular autumnal garden with wet leaves underfoot. We also get this extraordinary opening line, which starts with Es gibt Geister. There are spirits. They are all around us. They have driven me from hearth and home, from wife and child. People talk about the first line of Moby Dick, call me Ishmael, don't they? Or the first line of A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I think that this deserves immortality. It's absolutely fantastic.
It's beautiful the way it sort of encapsulates the whole mood of the film in just so short a space of time. Very, very beautifully written piece.
But I think already we're aware that these men are in a strange place.
There's something
not just
right.
physically.
Yeah.
And then this strange ethereal, the classic woman in white. There we go. There's one of those motifs.
Of course.
Glides through parting spindly overhead branches as she goes. And then the younger man, whom we're going to identify as Francis, says, well, that's my fiancée.
Yes, yeah.
And, so that's your fiancée, right. And
who is notably, and you'll see why as we go through, hopefully you've seen the film already, but sleepwalking by the looks of her. She is another somnambulist.
She is a somnambulist herself. That's obviously going to be a very major theme of the work. Here we get kind of two traumatized men, and they're basically jockeying for position as to who's the most traumatized. Because Francis, the younger man, says, it's all very well you talking about ghosts and spirits, but what happened to us, me and that woman, is worse than anything that happened to you. But what is interesting here is that this wonderful performance from Hans Lanzer Rudolf, who plays the old man. Yeah. He very much gives the impression that he's heard this story before.
You can see in his eyes, can't you?
I think he rolls his eyes at one point, and then he also looks as if he's about to drift off to sleep.
Which again is quite ironic, given the amount of references to sleep throughout the film. It's there, all every frame.
Exactly. Here, literally, he rolled his eyes there, without a doubt. Now, this was. Film was shot at the Lixi Atelier.
That's right, yeah.
In Berlin, Weissensee, a Berlin suburb. And the sets available to them were very small.
Indeed. I think they were estimated to be something like 6 foot by 6 foot.
Or was it 6 metres?
Or 6 metres by 6 metres. Not very big, whichever way you look at it. No.
Yes. But in this opening scene where the demonic Caligari appears, it's almost as if the director, Robert Wiene, is sort of flaunting.
That's right, yeah.
He's sort of flaunting it in the audience's face. Just look how small this set is.
Yeah.
Because later this set is going to be crowded with carnival goers.
Of course.
All sorts of people of the town. And it does actually extend backwards quite a long way, because we'll later on see quite small figures.
That's right.
Sort of passing in front of the painting of the sort of peak on which presumably a church is standing.
Yeah.
But it's almost as if, okay, these sets are small and you know, we're going to make no bones about it.
But it just adds to the claustrophobia of it. That's, you know, when you have a nightmare, nightmares are themselves quite claustrophobic.
Absolutely.
By their very nature. So, yeah, it just works to the film's advantage.
Here we see Heinz von Twardowski playing Alan. Alan seems to me to be a kind of stock figure particularly from drama and literature of this period. He's the kind of eternal student.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
He looks young enough, in fact, to be a current student, but he is that kind of almost Chekhovian figure.
Yes,
The guy who was a student and never quite graduated.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And he just kept going through academia. Yeah.
And maybe to a degree that also applies to his friend Francis.
Yes, yeah.
There are quite a few anomalies regarding the names in this film. The hero, if you like, Francis, is actually rendered in the German way with a Z. So
yes.
Francis.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of sources that just go ahead and call him Francis. Yeah. And also there's a question mark over the name of the heroine.
Yes, that's right, yes.
And we'll get to all that.
Of course.
But, of course, here, contemporary audiences and audiences now are looking at the actual what Holstenthal actually looks like. Yeah. And of course, we're staggered by the abstractions of it.
Of course,
It's not a place that anybody could actually live.
No. I mean, the geography of the architecture rather is impossible.
But what I particularly like is the fact that you will find comfy chaiselongs.
That's right.
And armchairs. And you know, solid props put among these extraordinary backdrops.
There's all these bits and pieces that like the common everyday in amongst these weird, impossible buildings.
Yes, well, of course, the classic point about Caligari is that it was an expressionist film.
That's right.
And we'll get on to define that in a minute. Very interesting moment here where a woman disappears into that exit at the back, and immediately Caligari comes out.
Right, yes.
Now, normally speaking, as where theatrical blocking is concerned, that's kind of clumsy.
That is,
but it's almost as if the woman has disappeared and has turned into Caligari. And that actually reminds me of one of the co-writers of this film, Hans Janowitz, claimed to have witnessed a sex murder.
He did, yes. I mean, that was one of the
Holstenthal in Hamburg in 1913.
Yes. Well, there's quite a nice quote from Siegfried Kracauer, who wrote the book From Caligari to Hitler, A Psychological History of the German Film. And he sort of quite graphically describes that evening. He said, one evening in October 1913, this young poet was strolling through a fair at Hamburg, trying to find a girl whose beauty and manner had attracted him. The tents of the fair covered the Reaper barn, known to any sailor as one of the world's chief pleasure spots. Nearby, on the Holstenthal, you can see the name reappearing here, Lederer's gigantic Bismarck monument stood sentinel over the ships in the harbour. In search of the girl, Janowitz followed the fragile trail of a laugh, which he thought hers, into a dim park bordering the Holstenthal. The laugh, which apparently served to lure a young man, vanished somewhere in the shrubbery. When a short time later the young man departed, another shadow, hidden until then in the bushes, suddenly emerged and moved along as if on the scent of that laugh.
Yes, well, another account of it suggests that the girl goes into the bushes and then this rather self-satisfied bourgeois-looking man emerges from the bushes, almost as if there's been a kind of transformation.
That's right.
And it just so happens that particular bit of blocking, which is theoretically a bit clumsy, kind of reminds me of that, because the woman disappears and then Caligari comes out immediately.
Yeah.
Here he's applying for a permit to show his spectacle, as it were, at the local fair. And the town clerk, who in the script actually had a name, Dr. Luders, the town clerk is extremely rude to him.
Yes.
In fact, in the film, he's quite a lot ruder to him than he is in the script. He's merely impatient in the script. Here, he's constantly saying, "Warten!
Yes. Wait.
And he's of course, to indicate the absurdity of authority, he's perched up on a ridiculously high stool.
We see that quite a lot throughout the film, authority figures up high, towering themselves over the ordinary people.
Exactly. And here he openly laughs at the idea of the Somnambulist Somnambulist. You what? Look, I've got more important things to do. My colleague will help
My
me.
flunky will
And
do
so,
this, yes.
not only has he been very rude to Caligari, and there's Caligari thinking, what?
Yes.
You've left me with this underling.
Yes.
I think that's grounds for. Well, I think I'll murder you.
Yes.
It's basically what he's thinking.
Indeed.
Here we have an iris out from an organ grinder and his monkey. And here's what I was saying: there's this huge hustle and bustle
Yes.
in a very small space.
Fantastic forced perspectives, isn't it? It's really clever. Wonderfully
And
done.
like Caligari, a number of these characters are dressed in the sort of costume of the Biedermeier period, which, loosely speaking, was in Central Europe from 1815 to 1848. It was the period that a year or two after this, F.W. Murnau would situate the Dracula story in when he made Nosferatu. And in there, of course, is Caligari looking classic Biedermeier with the absurd stovepipe hat and all the rest of it. But, of course, the costumes aren't actually consistent.
No. And I think partly that was deliberate because they sort of try to avoid too many references to when the film is actually set. In fact, I don't think there's any specific date given in the entire film.
It's time. The idea is for it to be timed.
Exactly. So all the costumes are a bit of a mix, bit of a mishmash because it's not set in any particular time or place, really.
The quotes normal characters are fairly normally dressed, and the grotesques in particular, Caligari especially, are not.
That's right.
This is definitely one of the film's many deviations from the script, and we'll get on to why deviations from the script are important. Because the script was set quite clearly in the modern day.
It was,
Telephones, weren't there?
That's right,
and all the rest of it.
All sorts of what were then modern technology, cars and things like that. So,
and the director, Robert Wiene, very, very particularly excluded that.
That's right, he didn't want it to be dated in any way.
Exactly. So here we get another of those motifs that's going to crop up in so many horror films subsequently. It's going to be a gift to Todd Browning in particular, who is himself a former carnival worker. Todd Browning in the USA was going to revel in carnival settings in his very strange and grotesque horror films that he made. Here we have the Feher. The liberation that is apparently symbolised by the fair, where everybody kicks back and they can do what they like and go and see weird displays like this. And it's interesting that Caligari, when playing up to the audience outside his booth like this, he comes across as a rather vulgar and rambunctious figure. It's only when he gets in Act 2, when he gets inside the booth and actually gets to Cesare's coffin box, only then does the strange, sinister persona emerge.
Because, of course, he couldn't be that outside. He'd frighten everybody off. So, of course, he has to be this sort of slightly sort of showman-esque type character outside, sort of luring them in.
Yes, exactly. Here we are in Dr. Luder's, as he's called in the script, in Dr. Luder's bedroom. Because, what do you know, Dr. Luders, the town clerk, has been murdered. Could there be any connection with his extreme rudeness to Dr. Caligari the day before?
I wonder.
Yes, I think there might be.
Yes.
Perhaps we ought to talk about the writers of this film, Hans Janowitz and Karl Mayer, because the question of authorship on this film was to become very fraught, wasn't it, in subsequent decades, largely because Janowitz gave one of the key accounts of this. There are several, aren't there? They all tend to contradict each other. But Janowitz's is one of the most important because it was taken up by Siegfried Krauss and became Holy Writ for many decades.
And it's only really been in recent years that people have started to question.
And it certainly requires questioning.
It requires a lot of
questioning.
There's a lot of
yes.
Well, I mean, it all comes down to simple things like who decided it was going to be an expressionist film. In the screenplay, there is no mention of expressionism or any other art form. It's just a screenplay. There's no indication of what the film should look like.
Apart from the fact that it's clearly set in the modern day.
Of course, exactly. Yeah. But Janowitz later would say, oh yes, it was me that brought the idea to this. And he's like, well, other people say they brought the idea to Wiene, and Wiene himself possibly brought the idea in. It's not really at all clear who actually sort of came up with the idea of the look
Well, Janowitz, in fact, specifically said, I think, and this is in the early 40s, isn't it, once he was in America, he specifically said that his script, his and Meyer's script, specified it should look like the artworks of Alfred Kubin.
Yeah.
And he said the art directors clearly misread the word Kubinischer to read Kubistischer. So it ended up looking cubist, which was never his intention. But then, of course, unfortunately, as tends to happen in these situations, the original script actually turned up.
That's right, yeah. And there's no mention of it.
No reference to any of this.
Not at all.
Certainly not to Kubin.
No, there is no mention at all of the visual look of the film. That was all down to Wiene and to his production designers, his art directors, and all the rest of it. These guys had sort of bonded. They'd met, Karl Mayer and Hans Janowitz had bonded because of their experiences in the First World War, which is a huge event which will overshadow the entire film.
And so many films.
And so many films of that period. I mean, don't forget, this was actually shot in 1919. It was the year after the war had ended, and ended badly for Germany. So, you know, there was the whole sort of national psyche had been damaged by it. And so, you know, it was a huge event. But they become confirmed pacifists because of their experiences. More importantly, they become very confirmed anti-authority figures. They couldn't stand authority figures, and they saw Caligari as kind of a representation of everything that had gone before in the German government of the war years. This sort of authoritarian dictatorial figure who was, you know, sending out young men to kill, and you know, just as they had. Exactly. So you like. That's the whole point of the film. The incidental details about, you know, the carnival and all the rest of it, and seeing the girl and thinking perhaps the girl he'd seen was the murder victim that he read about the following day. They were kind of the details, what they were trying to get across, I think, from what they were saying, was this sort of anti-authority stance following the events of the war.
One interesting point here, by the way, is that judging from the movement of this curtain with a rope on it, Caligari must have a stage manager. Or at the very least, he must have enlisted some local person to help him out. Because look what this curtain is about to do. And yet, he sort of starts it on its way, but then somebody else pulls it up. We never meet this stage manager, do we? Well, maybe it's us as well. It keeps it cleaner.
It's Cesare at the back of his box giving it a pull. He's not as
I don't think he's in a position to do that quite yet. But we'll go back to the story.
We will,
of the film in a minute. But this is one of the classic. This is one of the two real climaxes of the film, I suppose. And it's a pinnacle of horror. And I particularly like the way you only see half of Cesare initially because of the opening of the separate doors. The script, I believe, specified that he was very specifically in a coffin.
That's right, yes.
Well, it's not so much a coffin. It's like a kind of old-style coffin, just a very crude box. But it does have that, even the design feature of the sort of wibbly line.
That's right, yeah.
And here we get another of those classic lines, Cesare, awake from your dark nights.
Yes.
We get some backstory on Cesare. We discover that he's only 23.
Yes.
Conrad Veidt, the actor playing him, was in fact heading for 27 when making this film, but again, very young. But one thing that fascinates me about Cesare, he's the prototype he's a prototype misunderstood monster. He's in a way a prototype vampire. But you could almost argue that he's never been born.
No, that's right.
Because he's been asleep ever since being born. So he's had no normal consciousness, no normal life such as we know. So he is undead in a very literal sense.
That's right,
Because he's not quite alive. And Conrad Veidt's acting here, physical, facial acting, is absolutely shattering. I mean, even before this titanic struggle to open the eyes, you saw the flexing.
That's right, the mouth,
and the look of mortal terror when he realizes that he's actually back in the waking world.
And you can see that repeated. You know, we'll talk about the legacy of Caligari as we go along, but you'll see that in The Mummy.
Karloff doing the same.
And Karloff, of course, this is the Frankenstein monster walk as well, isn't it? So it's, you know, its stamp is all, this one scene, its stamp is all over the Universal horror films.
Well, and of course, from there through to horror films right up until now.
Decades to come, yeah.
Of course, Conrad Veidt would later become famous as an actor who could even act with the very prominent veins in his forehead. We don't see the veins in his forehead in this film because of the mop of hair.
Yeah.
But, the fact that he does that remarkable flexing of the muscles of his face is perhaps unsurprising given that. But it is an incredible display.
And it's one of the best, I know it sounds like a strange thing to say, but it's one of the best bits of waking up acting I've ever seen. He looks like a man who's just woken up. His eyes, when he's first open, before he becomes full terror, it's kind of, where am I?
Yes.
What's going on?
But it's a very profound kind of
that's right. Yeah.
disorientation, isn't it? Because as far as we're aware, he's literally been asleep for 23 years. Obviously, he's periodically woken up by Caligari, but nevertheless, these are like sort of little fugues of wakefulness.
Exactly.
Hence his look of utter terror.
Yeah. Because this isn't his natural state, unlike for us, where, being awake is our natural state. For him, it's something terrifying.
Yeah. One of the less disputable features of Janowitz's account is the fact that he and Meyer, one of the ways in which they bonded was they went to a fairground on the Kantstrasse in Berlin, and they saw a sort of hypnotized strongman doing an act, performing incredible feats of strength, but also coming out with predictions.
Yes.
Apparently. And so they went a very interesting route. Rather than having a great brawny, hypnotized strongman, they had this strange, ethereal, willowy, semi-zombie.
Yes, yeah. And the way it's built up, you kind of expect something more monstrous to come out of that box. The way he's talking about it. And when he comes out, he's kind of a very sad sort of figure, quite a pathetic figure.
Well, I think he's really... the sad, misunderstood monster who is compelled to do terrible things. Again, a terrific, a classic archetype.
Of course, that would become so popular throughout the decades to come.
And here you see what a beautiful young man he is, behind the strange kohl-rimmed eyes and the very rouged lips. You can see that he's a very beautiful young man. And one of the wonders of this is that the prototype monster is so beautiful. And yet his master, who of course is the prototype mad scientist, is a ghastly, slug-like figure.
Yes, that's right,
Corpulent, a little bit corpulent in the way that Germans always imagined the devil would be.
That's right, yeah.
But as played by Werner Krauss, Caligari is inexpressibly vile.
Yeah, it's a revolting creature.
He's a revolting figure. And this utter revoltingness is set against the very Gothic, but nevertheless beauty of his vassal. His monstrous vassal.
And of course he needed to be revolting because that's what the writers were aiming for. He was the epitome of everything that they felt had gone wrong with the German state.
By the way, we just saw a guy come in and light the lamps. There was one British magazine of the period while they were waiting. The Brits had quite a long wait to see this film. While they were waiting, there was one glossy British magazine that identified that lamplighter as Dr. Caligari by mistake. But I think that's interesting because he does look a bit like Caligari, which is to do with the fact that he is, brief though his appearance is, he is one of the, if you like, where acting is concerned, one of the expressionist features of this film. He is not one of these normal characters.
That's right. Yeah, he's one of the grotesques.
He is one of the grotesques.
Yeah.
And so, yes, he was mistaken.
Yes.
For Caligari by a British magazine. We're going to talk about the actors in this film here and there, because in the extraordinary visual brilliance of it all, it's very easy to dismiss them, as one British reviewer did in the 1920s, as a bunch of insane marionettes. But in fact, of course, they were, actors with careers, and obviously in the case, and it was the case for most of them, I think, that this was the pinnacle of a lot of their careers. We're briefly going to have a little pause here to indicate the passage of time. I don't think this was in the script, this scene, but this introduces us to Caligari's caravan.
Yes.
When we look at the title, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, of course we assume that refers to Cesare's coffin box.
Sure.
But it can also refer later on, when we get to the lunatic asylum, to his study.
That's right, yes.
And it's also been suggested that even this caravan could count as the cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Indeed, yes.
But yes, these were all interesting and very often up-and-coming actors. And we're about to find out, I think it's around here we find out, that actually Francis and Alan are rivals in love.
Yes.
Hans-Heinz von Twardowski, who plays Alan on the right here.
Who, I have to say, I'd not noticed this until just this second, strikingly similar to Matt Smith. modern audiences will look at him and think, oh, it's Matt Smith.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you know? Yes.
I'd not
Doctor Who
noticed
as
it before,
was.
yeah.
Yes, you know, you're quite right.
Yeah.
Well, it's that eternal student look I was talking
is,
about.
isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, well, he was actually 21 here. This was his first film. He'd made his stage debut earlier in the year, 1919, at Berlin's Lessing Theatre. And also in 1919, interestingly, given the fact that this is an expressionist film, he published a book called Der rasende Pegasus, The Raging Pegasus, published by Axel Juncker Verlag, and it was a collection of rather skittish parodies of contemporary expressionist poets. That was written by Hans Heinrich, as he credited himself on the book, Hans Heinrich von Twardowski. He then specialised, he's about to be murdered, but he then specialised in playing mixed-up young men, very often tragic young men. He appeared in Robert Wiener's next film, Genuine, as a love-struck killer. He also played Prince Otto, the mad Prince Otto, in Wilhelm Dieterle's Ludwig der Zweite, König von Bayern, in which Dieterle himself played Ludwig. That was the part, by the way, that John Mulder Brown would play in the Luchino Visconti version of Ludwig in 1973. But Twardowski's progress, he's departed the film at this point, but his progress is interesting because in the 1930s he goes to the USA, as so many German artists had to in the 1930s.
Of course.
And he continues acting and directing on stage, particularly at the Pasadena Playhouse. But then when the Second World War comes, he starts appearing in films like Confessions of a Nazi Spy, Hitler, Beast of Berlin, Hitler's Madman, The Strange Death of Adolf Hitler, The Hitler Gang. He also, by the way, pops up in Casablanca, opposite Conrad Veidt.
Right, yes.
Although Conrad Veidt is the big Nazi,
of course.
Twardowski is just a minor Nazi.
Yeah.
And he played Reinhard Heydrich in Fritz Lang's Hangmen Also Die. We may well talk about Fritz Lang later.
We will.
And he died at the relatively early age of 60 in his New York apartment in 1958. There's another interesting actor here, by the way, Elsa Wagner as the landlady, who was described in the script by Janowitz and Meyer as a gaunt old woman. Well, I think Wiene went rather differently there.
He went his own way, didn't he? Yeah.
She appeared in films by Murnau and E.A. Dupont and Ludwig Berger and Karl Fröhlich. And her last film was a Maximilian Schell film in 1973 called The Pedestrian, in which she appeared with Lil Dagover. And we're going to talk about Lil Dagover a bit more because she, of course, is the heroine of this film. There's something this is quite a protracted scene.
Yes.
In which the landlady tells Francis that his friend has been murdered and then takes him to see the murder scene. And it all ends up with Francis on the right with these beautiful angular movements of grief and despair, and the landlady just subsides and sort of stands disconsolate at the window.
Almost disappears, doesn't she?
She almost disappears into the blackness of the set.
Yeah.
It's actually a beautiful scene, but it's an interesting one because just before Alan's murder, as we pointed out, we discovered that Alan and Francis are rivals.
That's
in
right.
love.
Yeah.
So is it possible that here we're being led to sort of semi-suspect that who actually committed that murder? Might it have been
because
Francis?
We only see
he's looking very guilt-stricken here,
and we only see the murderer in silhouette, which I think you pointed out to me, didn't you? Doesn't really look like.
That's Shadow.
Yeah.
And it's unusual that, of course, shadow play was going to become a dominant feature of German films in the 1920s. And yet here, of course, the shadows, for the most part, are painted onto the sets, which is a bizarre expressionist touch. And yet there, we actually have a real shadow.
Yeah.
But is it Conrad Veidt's shadow? It doesn't look much like
Conrad Veidt. No.
And I wonder if that also is deliberate to sort of throw us off.
Yes. Yeah.
There is a still of what looks pretty clearly like Conrad Veidt actually stabbing Alan.
Yeah.
But of course we don't get that in the film, we just get the shadow.
That's right.
The shadow doesn't look like Cesare to me.
No.
I'm not saying it isn't Cesare, because of course it turns out that it is.
Of course. But I think he probably used misdirection.
Is there some misdirection being?
He's trying to keep us guessing as to who this kid, because obviously we haven't been told yet who the killer is. We don't know. We can surmise who it might be, but we haven't actually had any evidence for it yet. So he's trying to keep us on our toes, I think.
Well, of course, later on we're going to get a rather obvious and transparent red herring thrown
of course we
at us
are.
in the guise of an attempted murder.
That's right. Yeah.
And here we're in another bizarre set. Again, these are minor officials, so their stools aren't quite as ridiculously giddy as the town clerks were.
And they're very disorganised. Look, the paperwork is just scattered everywhere.
And some of it's stuck to the walls. And then we get the police chief walking in.
Yeah.
to consult with the two rather comical-looking policemen. And to me, slightly disconcertingly, the police chief looks like Alan.
Yes.
A slightly older version
right,
of Alan.
yeah.
He's got a very similar hat for a
Yes.
start. And this stairway that leads up to the police station was very definitely replicated in the Universal Frankenstein in 1931.
Oh, yes, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Charles D. Hall was a disciple of this film, I think.
Indeed, yes.
And he was the great designer at Universal. And there's a staircase that looks awfully like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, its fingerprints are on every horror film you can imagine for decades to come. Yeah.
But I think, I think the film is willing to flirt with absurdity, as I think the best horror films are, and it's happy to put in those policemen with their ridiculous walnuts moustaches, who, of course, remind you of silent movie comedy.
Of course. And we always, like you say, we always have the comic relief. Usually cops, usually sheriffs, usually whatever authority figures. And
Yet another motif.
Yeah.
The comedy relief cops.
Yeah, exactly. And here we are. May not have been the first one, but it's the first one that we know of. So yeah.
Oh dear. Well, this film made such an impact. There was a very interesting thing that Roxy Rotherford said. When the film was premiered in April 1921 in New York City, Roxy Rotherford, S.L. Roxy Rotherford, as he was known, he ran the Capitol Theatre, and of course later would found the Roxy Theatre. And he decreed that the film should be set to particular pieces of music that were described in the contemporary press as rich, weird themes by Stravinsky, Schoenberg, Strauss, and Debussy. And of course, these were sounds that were as alien to American ears at the time as the visuals of this film were.
Yeah.
And he actually said the music had, as it were, to be made eligible for citizenship in a nightmare country. Now, by nightmare country, of course, he was referring to, if you like, the geography of an unbalanced mind, because we're going to find out that this whole tale is a tale told by a lunatic.
That's right.
But on a broader level, as you were suggesting earlier on, Germany at this time was itself a nightmare country.
It was, yeah.
Because it was in a nightmarish, depressed state in the aftermath of the First World War.
Yeah.
And in December 1919, which is when this film started shooting, a Robert Reinert film called Nerven, Nerves, came out in Munich, and then by January 1920 it's in Berlin. But Nerven is theoretically, it's a phantasmagoric piece that theoretically is about the nervous breakdown of a big shot captain of industry and his circle of friends. But in fact, it's a kind of hair-raising image of the communal breakdown.
The entire country's
that was affecting
breakdown.
the entire country. The reparations imposed at the Treaty of Versailles were absolutely blisteringly punitive.
And just the trauma on the
Civil
normal
War
people.
nearly broke out.
But the trauma on the normal people, we always talk about the great loss of life in the Great War, and we talk about it from our perspective because, history is written by the winners. Yeah. The Germans lost hundreds of thousands of their young men as well, who never came back. Absolutely. And so, they were dealing with all of that, and then this comes along, and just stirs up the nightmares even more.
But the irony being that in this terribly depressed state, and also in a state where inflation was going berserk, and the Deutschmark eventually was worth virtually nothing.
That's right, yeah.
But in this terrible atmosphere, the German film industry suddenly was rising like a phoenix.
Yes, yeah. It took off after this point, really, didn't it? I mean, it'd done quite well up until now, but from this point on, throughout the 20s...
It
became world-beating, yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah. I must say, we were talking about the Universal Frankenstein here earlier, but here I think Jimmy Sangster, when he wrote The Curse of Frankenstein, which was the first Hammer Frankenstein film in the late 50s, I think he was remembering this revolting scene of Caligari feeding the monster, because Peter Cushing, as Frankenstein in The Curse of Frankenstein, is seen preparing horrible hash.
Yeah.
You don't actually see him feeding it to the creature, but you see him preparing
That's right,
And I wonder if Sangster remembered that, because that's a very unusual, tiny little detail in this film.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he may be in this cataleptic state, but nevertheless he needs feeding.
He needs feeding. He needs
in order
to,
to
to
exist.
stay alive. Well, stay alive, stay existing. Yes.
And as I say, there's a very similar scene in
Indeed, there
The
is.
Curse of
Yeah.
Frankenstein. But see, Roxy Rotherford, when he referred to a nightmare country, in a way, I don't suppose he was aware of it, but he was actually sort of laying down one of the classic kind of, really, it became a critical commonplace, the fact that horror films thrived against a backdrop of deprivation and chaos. And of course that was going to happen during the Depression in America, and also there's some very nervy, fantastique films that come out of France during the German occupation of the Second World War. And Rotherford really was quoting the Marquis de Sade unconsciously, I think, because way back in 1800, the Marquis de Sade had commented on how many Gothic novels were coming out, focusing on sorcery and phantasmagoria. And he said this style was the inevitable fruit of the revolutionary shocks felt by the whole of Europe. And he said that only by invoking hell and venturing into the country of chimeras could writers hold the attention of a public that had experienced more misfortune in 4 or 5 years than the most famous novelist in literature could paint in a century. So in his case, the French Revolution had just happened. Here, the absolute trauma of the First World War. We've just seen the big red herring. The murderer. The attempted murderer. Who sets up yet another motif, the copycat killer.
That's right,
The sneaky little thing thinks, oh, I can kill that old lady by mimicking. Presumably the newspaper accounts have been a bit candid and have mentioned the strangely shaped dagger and the fact that the town clerk was stabbed in the side.
One supposes that back then they didn't really sort of think too much about giving away vital information in news reports.
No, absolutely. But wind back the film when you've got a moment, because there are some nice close-ups of the killer, the attempted killer there. And for decades there was the idea that he was played by none other than Rudolf Klein-Rogge. Who would go on to be the master criminal Dr. Mabuse for Fritz Lang, and of course he'd also be Rotwang in Lang's Metropolis. And he does look very similar to Klein-Rogge. But I don't think it's Klein-Rogge.
It's just not quite close enough.
Quite close enough.
No.
And modern sources attribute the role to an actor called Ludwig Rex. And I am willing to bet that Ludwig Rex did play that murderer.
Klein-Rogge doesn't really appear in the history of Caligari, as far as I can tell, until the early 1960s.
Was it 1962?
1962, there was an academic paper, and they'd given... and prior to that, I can find no reference to him being in Caligari at all. He's certainly not credited. Now, I wonder if this is one of those classic examples of the thing we find all the time when we do these things, those sort of cinematic Chinese whispers. Someone says it is, so it must be, and it's just taken as facts.
It just take wing, and then if in doubt, print the legend. People so often do. You cannot stamp them out, can you? But I think, I'm afraid, that's Ludwig Rex. Talking of Ludwig Rex, the films that Ludwig, we don't know much about Ludwig Rex. He was turned 32 while this film was being made, and he died in London, interestingly, in 1979 at the age of 91. But the titles of some of the films he made around this time are instructive, I think, regarding the sort of psychological state of Germany, where it's turning out these marvellous films. He appeared in Die Strahlen des Todes, The Rays of Death, Das Haus des Schreckens, The House of Horrors, Der Spuk des Lebens, The Ghost of Life, and also one of the many Hound of the Baskervilles adaptations that Germans like so much. Der Hund von Baskerville, Das Haus ohne Fenster, The House Without Windows. There he is. Oh, you don't need to wind back. There's the close-up I'm talking about. Now you see, I think we think that we're going to say that's
we're going to say
it looks very like Klein-Rogge, but it actually is
just not quite close enough, I don't think.
If you want to get technical, the nose isn't right.
Right, exactly.
It simply is.
The nose is a giveaway.
I'm going to go out on a limb. We're going to go out on a limb.
We are going to go out on a limb. We're going on a limb together. Come crashing down.
We're going to say that was Ludwig.
Yes, I think so.
But as I say, we've got the accumulating motifs. We now have a copycat killer. I mean, how often does that turn up? We have to point out, of course, that this film was an enormous influence, not just on horror films, but on film noir.
Yes, that's right. Yes, of course.
The pervading paranoia of this film, and really, it is all about
paranoia.
Post-war paranoia. Was going to bleed, if you like, into film noir.
Of course. You've got a lot of the archetypal film noir characters in this. You've got, those dark streets down which no man should walk alone. You see a lot of those in this film. So yeah.
And it's all there. Now, Jane Olfen, often rendered as Olsen, but I believe the script had it as Olfen. Sometimes it's Olfens, but I think they've settled on Olfen. Maybe the Olsen confusion arose because very often F was used in place of an S, wasn't it, in ancient scripts. But I think it's Olfen. We contrive her actually going to visit Caligari because she's wondering where her father has got. And so now we get another motif where the heroine is, well, in this case, she stumbles into it, if you like, but she's lured into the madman's lair. And the madman proudly displays his creation, if you like. I think one writer about the film referred to the fact that Caligari proudly shows off his erect somnambulist, which is an unfortunate phrase, but actually not necessarily, not all that inapposite, because there's something obscene about it.
There is.
And he's got this beautiful young woman in his clutches, if you like, and he can show off this bizarre thing and take an almost sexual pleasure in it.
And we see that in villains from everything from Gothic horror to James Bond to everything beyond, don't we? So, that willingness of the villain to show off and sort of, not do, what any sensible villain would do and actually just murder the people in their way, but actually sort of explain everything to them and show off what they've got and all the rest of it.
Yes, indeed.
And this seems to be one of the first examples of that.
It's hard to say when Caligari reaches peak repulsive because he's pretty
nasty from the start.
Repulsive from beginning to end. He does a little hop there of excitement. Here it is. Here's my erect somnambulist, as somebody put it. And he does a little hop of excitement.
He's like the proud father, isn't he?
The proud father of this bizarre, tragic creature who is now getting a sort of unscheduled awakening.
Yes.
So obviously the director, Wiene, doesn't give it the same emphasis that we had
before. Of course.
Veidt indicates what's in the script, which is that is he feeling some new emotion?
Yes.
Is he feeling any kind of emotion? Has he ever felt an emotion on looking at... And here is another motif. The misunderstood monster who quails in the presence of beauty.
That's right, yeah. And,
but the stare from both of them, particularly as they watch her go, is just, this is very, very frightening.
It is.
They're a ghastly and grotesque pair.
Indeed.
This scene coming out of the cemetery after Alan's funeral, which you'll notice even in the intertitle is Expressionist with a little crucifix that appears on the lettering. This was much simplified from the script.
Yes.
It's but there's Rudolf Lettinger, by the way, as Dr. Olfen, Jane's father. He was in his mid-50s here, and he'd worked with Max Reinhardt, the great theatrical pioneer, as so many of the actors had here. Famous for playing Cyrano de Bergerac on stage, and this was his most famous screen role, but he didn't really get into talkers to any degree. His last film was Emil and the Detectives, a 1931 UFA film co-written by Billy Wilder and Erich.
That's right. Yes, he was, yes.
But again, he was a very well-known stage actor, and he's in here for a fairly smallish supporting role. But again, another archetypal role. The heroine's father.
Yeah, that's right.
Who is, as was so often the case, actually a doctor.
Yes.
A sort of pillar of the community. Not necessarily terribly fascinating or interesting, but a sort of bastion of normality.
It's meant to be, I think, it's a figure of respectability and normality in the madness that's going on around this poor woman during these scenes.
But this film took quite a long time getting to Britain. In fact, there were actually comments about the film, of course, proliferated in the early 20s, while the British were basically thinking, where the hell is it?
Yes.
And here we get, we'll get back to the British response in a minute. Here we have the classic expressionist acting moment where Veidt literally appears to be a kind of automated outgrowth of the sets.
Yeah.
Literally gliding along that
Yes.
wall. And here, of course, we're going to get a scene that was replicated in the Universal Frankenstein and so many others.
Of course.
The creature appears at the heroine's window.
Yeah.
One marvellous thing here, which deviates from the script, which specified muslin curtains, is that Cesare doesn't just come in through the window, he literally dismantles it.
Right, yes.
He takes the window apart.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very odd little touch, that, isn't it?
And this, I think, this is the scene that, to contemporary audiences, I suspect, had them screaming.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
This is terrifying stuff. There's just the strange, ethereal, stately way that he approaches.
The suspense in the scene, because we kind of know where it's meant to be going, but it's taking its own sweet time getting there, and the suspense must have been unbearable.
Beautiful, and of course the abundance of white. The muslin has been transferred to her bed, I noticed.
That's right, yes.
Rather than at the curtains.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a beautiful effect when he drags her off, and the muslin sort of looks like a wedding veil.
Yeah.
A wedding.
The train.
Train.
Yes.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Exactly.
Here we are. The monster is given pause by beauty. That's the woman who turned up at the booth.
That's right.
today.
Yes, he recognises her. Yes.
And he's going to turn ugly when she struggles because he doesn't know how to cope with it.
That's right. Yeah.
And rather interestingly, when he grabs her, he's going to leave strange black stains on her white nightdress.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I wonder if he's sort of covered in tar or something.
Right.
There they are.
Yeah, because it's never made clear what that's meant to be, is
it
it?
is.
What's on his hands?
Yes, it's very
strange.
curious.
Yeah.
But Veidt actually was perfect casting for this. He was already something of a horror star. Just the month before this film started shooting, in November 1919, he was the centerpiece of a Pommer film called Unheimliche Geschichten, Uncanny Tales.
Yeah.
And he actually went on record saying, I am a confirmed spiritualist, a quite good medium, and I've known since boyhood the power of suggestion. This has affected nearly every facet of my artistic life and my life in general. That's the reason why such a good role as Cesare in Caligari, for example, has always excited me.
Wow.
He also had a very interesting thing to say about one of the themes of this film, which is possession, because we have to remember that Cesare is possessed by Caligari.
Of course, that's right, yeah.
And Caligari, as it turns out, is himself possessed by another guy, previously called Caligari.
Yeah. Just to interrupt one second,
yes.
another one of those great motifs that we're going to see a million times in future, the monster carrying the woman across the rooftops to try and escape. How many times are we going to see that in horror films in the coming years?
Well, I know, absolutely. All the time.
All the time, yes.
I think one may as well just say all the time.
All the time, yeah.
But in 1933, he said, there is a strange power which comes into me, magically it seems, and transmutes not only my inner but my physical being when I am called upon to express myself on the stage or before a camera. It is difficult to speak of this, yet it is the most authentic thing I have experienced. It is precisely as though I were possessed by some other spirit when I enter on a new task of acting.
Wow.
So he's talking about the whole business of transforming into another person and talking about it in terms of possession. He was also very eloquent on the theme of doppelgangers. He played doppelgangers often.
That's right.
But he was very charmed by the idea that his own doppelganger was out there in cinemas all around the world.
Yes. Yeah.
In 1940, I think he said that, I can sit here talking to you, New York Times interview, and I can be drinking my whiskey and soda, but I know that there's this doppelganger.
Yes,
on me
I'm out there somewhere else.
It's a charming. It's a sort of dope. It's a sort of It's a sort of drug for the actor.
That's right.
The fact that he is himself a doppelganger.
Yes.
So he was a deep thinker on this, and on top of which he was, I think, one of the most mesmeric actors the cinema has ever known.
Yeah.
And as regards being a horror star, as he effectively was at this early stage, he was 6'3".
Yep.
And he was formidable.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was the greatest Dracula we never had.
He nearly was Dracula.
Yeah, he
of
nearly
course, when
was.
Universal were initially planning Dracula. What a shame that didn't
I
happen.
know.
I mean, we all love Bela Lugosi.
Of course, yeah.
What a
but-
shame that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But he was not. He was a mesmeric.
Yeah.
He became a cult figure very quickly.
Yes.
People like Michael Powell
That's
would
right.
seek him out
Yeah.
and put him in several films, notably The Thief of Baghdad, in which I think you get to see what he would have been like as
That's
Dracula.
right. I think so. It's the closest, isn't it?
Yeah, and he was a remarkable actor, and to think that this classic role of his was done when he did this when he was just 26.
And doing it largely without speech, largely without the tools that you would normally get from an actor. His character doesn't talk, he doesn't communicate very well. He's just,
Well, even in the context of a silent
Silent
film, he
film,
literally
yeah.
has only five words to say.
That's right, yeah.
Inevitably, one doesn't hear them.
Sure.
But the character himself has only five
and
words
it's
to say.
literally all done with his face. Whereas the others could get by, there'll be an intertitle to convey what I'm saying.
Yes.
He has to convey everything with his physical
Yes.
physical
I mean,
appearance.
it's one of those, along with Krauss as Caligari, whom we'll discuss later. It is one of, well, it's the prototype misunderstood monster,
Yeah.
and Krauss is the prototype mad scientist.
That's right, yeah.
And these performances burn themselves indelibly.
Oh,
into
yeah.
Cinema.
You can
cinema
see
history.
why so many other directors came along and looked at this film and thought, that's how it's done.
Yeah.
This is how we do this kind of film.
Here's Friedrich Feher, who plays Francis. He's 30 here. He'd been acting on the stage for 12 years, including for Max Reinhardt, as so many of the actors in this film had. He'd been on screen for 8 years, and indeed he'd been directing films since 1913. He played several leads prior to this, but this is the film that really sealed his reputation, to such a degree that he was able to set up his own film company. And in the 20s, he made a whole bunch of films starring his wife, Magda Sonia, notably Matahari, which co-starred Fritz Kortner. He was forced out of Berlin in 1933. He was Jewish. Don't think we need to elaborate on why
Nope.
he
No,
thought
I
it was
think it's
politic
fairly
to
obvious.
leave Berlin. He went to Czechoslovakia and then Britain, set up Concordia Films in Britain. We'll talk about the attempts at making Caligari remakes later.
Yes, of course.
By 1936, he was in the USA, founding symphonic films and making musical featurettes for distribution by Paramount. He was also, incidentally, a conductor. His only acting role in the US was also his last acting role in Jive Junction in 1943 for a fellow Austrian emigre and a fellow veteran of Expressionism, Edgar G. Ulmer.
Yeah.
He also ran a grocery store while in the USA when things weren't going too well. He returned to Germany in 1950 and he was looking into making musical films for TV when he died in Stuttgart at, again, a relatively early age, 61.
Yes. Shame.
I rather like him in this film.
He's very good.
He has a very difficult, the sort of hero character in
he's
horror
dominant
narratives
hero,
generally is often a rather dull stick.
Yeah.
Now here it's useful that he turns out to be in an insane
Of course.
I think he treads a very fine line because he is the genius of the film. Of course, is that he is the representative of normality.
That's right.
All along until we find out, until our slight suspicions from the prologue are confirmed at the end.
Yes.
We realise he's in an insane asylum.
Of course.
You get a very good look at Krauss's makeup there, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is extravagant.
He's extraordinary, isn't it? Really extraordinary.
Apparently, Krauss himself went on record saying that when they started shooting the film, he got together with Veidt and the other leads saying, look, this film is going to look extraordinary.
Yeah.
We have to, not only in terms of acting, we have to devise
Of course.
makeup
Yeah.
that will, be in harmony.
But when you're battling these sets and these designs and the lighting and all the rest of it, I mean, you've got to do something to stand out, I guess.
Well, I think that was his point, wasn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
We are about to get the first twist. This is another one, another sort of trailblazer in that it throws twists.
That's right, yes.
It delights in throwing twists at the audience. I was just saying earlier, by the way, that the film took a long time to get to Britain.
Oh, yeah.
But one sort of preview in 1921, something like 3 years before it actually got to Britain, was in the sketch, where somebody said, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the anonymous reviewer said, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a film which inflicts swift stabs of delicious horror on its audiences, and provides them with a kick at the finish, as well, in the shape of a most unexpected ending.
Ah.
And by the way, that reviewer referred to Cesare as the ghostly, ghastly sleepwalker.
Right.
And just the month before, in April 1921, the New York Times reviewer had used exactly the same phrase about Cesare, calling him a ghostly, ghastly sleepwalker. So I think in the sketch, the British anonymous writer there may have read the New York Times review.
And it's stuck there, yeah.
But I do love that phrase, a film which inflicts swift stabs of delicious horror. I mean, he could be referring to Hitchcock's Psycho.
Of course, yeah. But also interesting that they were referring to it as a horror film, even that early.
Well, they didn't codify it as a horror film, but they indicated that the main ingredient was horror.
Yeah.
In fact, outside Germany, so many reviews basically invoked the name of Edgar Allan Poe to give the prospective viewers an idea of what they were in for, and they would just leave it at that. I mean, how do we digest this film?
Sure.
We'll compare it to Edgar Allan Poe. In fact, previews in Britain literally said it was based on a story by Edgar Allan Poe. It is actually, and we're right at that point now, it is actually quite similar to an 1845 Poe story called The System of Dr. Tarr
That's right.
and Professor Feher,
Yeah.
which was the classic "the lunatics have taken over the asylum"
Yes,
scenario.
exactly.
It is actually similar to a Poe story.
It is.
But to actually say, as some British preview writers said, that it was literally based on a Poe story.
In America, they liked the word morbid when it came to the film.
They liked morbid.
Morbid was it crops up in more than one review, describing it as a very morbid film.
Yes. As German films tend to be.
Yes,
as they say.
Yes, of course.
Here is another motif, the terrifying moment when Caligari is revealed as the director of the asylum behind his desk. I must say, it's quite chilling to this day.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it's still got that power that it had in 1920.
It does. Here we see three of Caligari's fellow doctors, who very soon are going to be very willing to conspire with Francis to basically spy on Caligari. So I think we can assume they don't really like him.
No.
Because they sort of make sure he's asleep, and then they basically break into his cabinet, his study.
Again, to sort of not wishing to sound too much like a stuck record, because he is the despised authority figure. He is the despised ruler of the symbol of everything that's gone wrong. So of course they want to spy on him and bring him down.
Indeed. Of these three guys, by the way, the two older ones who look magnificent, we don't know who they were, but the young man in the middle is Henry Peters Arnolds, who was a 22-year-old actor from Holland. And he was plucked, just as Hans-Heinz von Twardowski, Alan, was plucked. He was plucked from Berlin's Lessing Theatre.
Right.
And I think they make an interesting little trio, don't they?
They do.
The two rather sage-looking ones, and the
young impetuous one.
The young impetuous one in the middle. Yeah, exactly. And now here they are. They're very happy to just go into his study and have a good old search.
Yes, search around. Yeah.
Put the lights on.
That wonderful skeleton watching over them on the left.
Yes, as alienists often did. There's either a skull. There's all. Yeah. No mad doctor is complete unless he's got a skeleton on display, or at the very least a skull on his desk.
That's right, yeah, absolutely right. Yep.
So there we go. Motif number, we've lost count.
We've lost count of them now, yeah. And of course it's guarding the record is guarding
the books that give the whole story away.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is, they're looking in this rather fabulous looking book published in 1726 called Somnambulismus, and they're going to find out that there was a previous Caligari, an Italian one, in 1703.
That's right.
Reign of terror in Italian villages, etc. By means of a sleepwalker called Cesare.
Which is a fantastically unexpected twist, isn't it, at this point? It's one of those you genuinely do not see coming.
No, it's it's a brilliant story.
It is, yeah.
And Janowitz would express horror in the 40s with a very generous helping of hindsight. He would say, we intended this anti-war allegory, which, although he did actually admit that I can see that now, he said. He did at least say that.
Yeah.
But he expressed horror at the fact that Wiene and the art directors, Erich, and Reimann, had imposed this expressionist.
Yes, that's right.
And also, most egregiously, had imposed a frame.
That's right.
Suggesting that it was just a story told by a madman. So this anti-war allegory was the babblings of a lunatic.
Right.
I think we'll point out later that, in fact, Wiener's, and I'm pretty sure it was Wiene.
I'm pretty sure
Fritz Lang claimed to have done it, but he's yet another unreliable
Exactly,
narrator. I think Wiene did it. The frame imposed by Wiene actually makes the story more subversive.
It does,
not less, because
it does.
The psychiatrist, the alienist, at the very end, the apparently real Caligari, whatever his name is not a comforting figure.
And in fact, I wonder if Meyer, the co-writer, may have actually seen things slightly differently, because when he was serving in the army during the war, he'd suffered some mental health issues and had actually had a run-in with a army psychiatrist.
Well, again, Janowitz told that story rather than Meyer himself.
Yeah, of course.
But again, we have to approach that story with a bit of caution, because apparently Meyer was invalided out on day one.
Day one.
Because he had dodgy feet.
Yes. It seems everybody has a different story to tell about how this happened.
I mean, the story of the sex murder in the Holstenwall in Hamburg, great stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, chilling stuff, but great stuff. And also the story of the psychological warfare with the army psychiatrist on the part of Meyer. But I think we have to take them all with a little bit of a pinch of salt.
Maybe we could see this as yet another trailblazer, the whole hype that went with films.
Yes.
They sort of Janowitz in particular was building up this sort of mythology around the film to make it sound even more interesting.
His piece about the film was called The Story of a Famous Story.
That's
and by
right.
1942 or whatever it was, he was well aware it was a famous story.
Of course,
and he felt he had to stake his claim.
That's right, yeah.
And luckily, poor old Wiene had made the terrible mistake of dying in 1938.
Yes.
So he couldn't plead his case.
Yeah.
By the way, Krauss gives a very funny indication of total madness there by shoving his hand into his lapel and mincing towards Cesare in a sort of a very Napoleonic way.
That's right, yeah.
A little joke there about the fact that people in lunatic asylums apparently all think they're Napoleon.
The Napoleon, yes.
Interestingly enough, Krauss did play Napoleon on stage and film after this in a play co-written by, get this, Benito Mussolini.
Really? Wow.
And I'm afraid Krauss actually probably had no qualms about appearing in a play co-written by Mussolini because, well, we'll talk about Krauss. But this is where horror and comedy actually coexist in a beautiful way. The grotesque exaltation.
Yes.
He actually tears the book in two, or at least tears off the back cover, because he's in such a heightened state, and he's in love with this somnambulist, because
that's right.
Finally he's got a somnambulist to experiment on.
Exactly.
So he actually loves. So when he displays the erect somnambulist to Jane earlier on, he's displaying a kind of love object.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Of his own.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about Werner Krauss. He's absolutely brilliant in this film. He's only 35 here.
Right, yeah.
Which I think might surprise people. He'd made his professional debut. He does. Well,
makeup.
A brilliant actor and plenty of makeup. Yeah. He'd made his professional debut relatively recently in 1903. He'd made his debut with Max Reinhardt in 1913 and started in films in 1960. It was really the notoriety of this film and this performance that propelled him into becoming a huge stage star in the 20s. As well as playing Napoleon both on stage and screen, he also played Iago in Othello, both on stage and screen. And on screen, of course, it was with Emilianus as Othello. He did Scherben for Lupu Pick and Das Wachsfigurenkabinett for Paul Laney and Der Student van Prague with Veidt for Heinrich Gallen and Secrets of a Soul for G.W. Pabst. But when the Nazis came to power, in sharp contrast to Veidt, who was markedly anti-Nazi and was put on a blacklist by the Nazis and left and became a British film star and then finally went to Hollywood before dying very early at the age of 50 in 1943. But unlike Veidt, Krauss stayed put and he became vice president of the Reichstheaterkammer. He was made an actor of the state in, I think, 1934. When he went to the West End to appear in a Gerhard Hauptmann play in 1933 with Peggy Ashcroft, there was a huge protest in the auditorium of the Shaftesbury Theatre, stink bombs and all the rest of it. And after the war, when he played John Gabriel Borkmann at Berlin's Theater am Kurfürstendamm, there were punch-ups in the auditorium, and street demonstrators outside were subdued with water cannon, all because he had thrown his lot in with the Nazis. And particularly he had played a whole bunch of Jewish caricatures in the 1940 film Jud Süß.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
His contemporary, Fritz Kortner, called him ein Nazi und ein Schweinhund, aber ein großer Schauspieler. A Nazi and a complete bastard, but a great actor.
Yes.
And he died in 1959 at the age of 75. Look at these speech bubbles.
It's magnificent, isn't it?
Du musst Caligari werden. You must become Caligari, which in fact was the kind of pre-release teaser poster film, wasn't it? And all of Berlin was thinking, what the hell does that mean? Du musst Caligari werden. But of course those opticals were the work of...
Well, they were the work of quite an important and significant figure in the early years of German cinema, Ernst Kunstmann.
Oh, yes.
And yes, these were the optical effects that he created. He trained as, of all things, a lathe operator. You couldn't get anything further away from this, really, could you? He'd trained as a lathe operator, went away, inevitably fought in the war. And when he came back, he started working at Decla-Bioscop, the producers of the film, as a stagehand.
Right.
But he started to show this interest in the camera and what it could do, the potentials of what it could do. And he met this other sort of titan of early special effects, a guy called Eugene Schuftan.
Oh, yes.
And we'll know his name, of course, because of the Schuftan process, which was a very early way, using a mirror where you could combine actors with models and painted backdrops and so on. And it was used for years and years and years afterwards. It was a hugely important process shot. And he helped to develop it with Schuftan. So Kunstmann was there at the start of what we now recognise as visual effects, rather than simple special effects, which have, been around for years on the stage. He was the one that first came along with this. And he created visual effects for things like Fritz Lang's films Der müde Tod.
Destiny, as it was released in English-speaking countries.
Of course, Metropolis, because, special effects fest, that one. And, and he had a fantastically prolific career, doing things like Der letzte Mann in 1924 for F.W. Murnau. The Last Laugh.
Yeah.
Das Testament des Dr. Mabuse in 1933. Triumph des Willens in 1935, The Triumph of the Will. The 1943 version of Munchausen and Titanic, those came out together. He was doing all the model shots in those and compositing them together live in the camera, as it were. And perhaps, for some of us of a certain generation, his greatest work was in that immortal children's classic, The Singing Ringing Tree, in 1957, a film made for German television, which frankly I think is probably the only thing in Germany that was more terrifying than Caligari.
So he was the guy responsible for the speech bubbles.
He was in the speech bubbles, yeah.
Hermann Warm, one of the three art directors, was very convinced that this film should look like drawings come to life. And it does.
And it does.
And there you actually have speech bubbles as in a comic.
And I suspect it was Warm that actually said, we should have these speech bubbles in it, how do we do it? And Ernst Kunstmann came along and said, I can do that, yeah.
Talking of Warm and Reimann and Erich, the art directors, we ought to say a word about Expressionism.
We should.
Do we put a capital E on it or a small e? It's almost like the word Gothic. How do you define it?
How do you define it?
Well, I don't think we're not going to attempt to define it here, but we're going to define it in terms of how it is applied in this film. And would you believe it, the first ever reference in the British trade press to this film in June 1920 had a very handy description, a very handy definition, if you like. Adelaide Golding in Kinematograph Weekly said that a scene painter is employed to paint the environment of the artistes in such a manner as to convey to the beholder an exact mental impression of their moods through the expression of their surroundings. The effect is quite a revelation, and the picture is the first of its kind. So, in other words, Expressionism, certainly as applied here, is an exaggerated means of rendering psychological states and making them visible.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
in fact, Expressionism had been around in the arts for a good 15 years.
It had,
It's
yeah.
only now coming to the cinema, and some people would argue that, in fact, it was running out of steam a bit by this stage.
Well, indeed, there was the Expressionist writer Casimir Edschmid thought that very thing, in fact. He was complaining that Expressionism today affords, this was written in 1919, so the year that this went into production.
Yes.
Expressionism today affords titillation and edification to clergymen's daughters and factory owners' wives. What once seemed a daring gesture has now become routine. The thrust forward of the day before yesterday has become the gimmick of yesterday and the big yawn of today. So
well,
it seems like Expressionism had become a fairly commonplace thing, particularly in Germany. People recognised what Expressionism was. But,
And, and you can express your snobbery to the full when you say, oh dear,
of course.
now shop girls are interested in it. Oh, in which case we can forget it.
And
It's
now that shop
yesterday's
girls are into it,
Yes.
we can put it in films. We can put it to the cheap entertainment of film because it's been coarsened and cheapened anyway. So,
Well, of course, Erich Pommer, who ran Decla, was frankly just concerned to make a film that
That's right,
would
yeah.
have a huge impact.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so really the application of Expressionism was really a cynical commercial
Oh, it
ploy.
was, yeah,
This is
of
certainly,
course.
this film stands at the head of the art film tradition, indubitably. And yet the artistic nature of it could be described as having been pasted on
Of course,
for commercial reasons.
Of
In
course.
fact, I think it was Pommer's co-producer Rudolf Meinert who actually sanctioned it with Robert Wiener's
That's right,
enthusiastic
yeah.
support.
Yeah.
Now we're back and we encounter again this fascinating old man. I think he gives a wonderful performance. Hans Lanzer Rudolf, playing the old man. Very little is known about him. In fact, he was even billed under a slightly different name sometimes, Hans Lanzer Rudolf. He's about 59 or 60 here, apparently. He'd done theatre work in New York City. He was with Conrad Veidt in a film called Decla-Bioscop. He was also in a film scripted by Gustav Meyrink called Dr. Sacrobosco der Grosse Unheimliche, the extremely uncanny Dr. Sacrobosco, perhaps. I think, and we don't know very much else about it.
Right.
Here we see that the world of the asylum is, strangely enough, isn't any different, really, to the madman's vision. And of course, people have glossed this as a mistake. But of course, I think the paranoid thing is that the madman's vision is actually accurate. That is what the world is really like.
The madness has infected the real world, and this is, there's no distinction between the two anymore.
That's right. And now Francis says that guy in there with the flower is Cesare.
Yeah.
And the old man is probably thinking, well, I know I'm crazy, but this guy's even crazier. I better get out. I better leave this guy behind.
I've had quite enough of this
And so
one.
there's a very funny moment when Hans Lanzer Rudolf literally sort of sidles off screen to get away from Francis.
Yeah.
But also, of course, here we see Jane. And we need to say a word about Little Dagover.
Of course we do, yes.
The part actually was intended by the writers for Gilda Langer, but she was more involved with Paul Zinner by the time this film was made. And in any case, actually, she died on the 31st of January 1920, aged only 23.
Yes.
So, which I would imagine is only a few days after the film finished shooting.
That's right,
so,
yeah.
So, but anyway, they chose Little Dagover, who was 32, quite a bit older than Gilda Langer. And she adopted her stage name from that of her first husband, who was the actor Fritz Dagover, so she adapted it as that name. She'd just done Die Spinner for Fritz Lang. She'd something to do Der Mode Tod and Dr. Mabuse der Spieler for Fritz Lang. And she actually, in her, she was often cast, she was a titanic figure of Weimar cinema, and often cast as noble women.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
in fact, her 1979 autobiography, which was the year before she died, was called Ich war die Dame, I was the lady.
Yes.
And she actually said in that book, in the late summer of 1919, it so happened that Dr. Robert Wiene offered me a leading role in a film called Das Kabinett des Dr. Caligari, which was to be produced with completely new artistic means. The time around 1919 was a veritable breeding ground for Expressionism, as was seen in the film. And then she asked the rhetorical question, aren't all standards to be reassessed in times of chaos and disorientation?
Yes. Ties in with what you were saying earlier, doesn't it? Yeah.
She was hugely popular in the 20s in France as well as in Germany. During the Third Reich, she made largely innocuous films,
Sure.
not propagandistic films. And by the 60s, she'd moved into West German TV. And her last films in the 70s were both for, well, the most notable ones were both for Maximilian Schell.
Yeah.
The Pedestrian, which I mentioned earlier, and Tales from the Vienna Woods. She's setting a template for innumerable horror heroines.
Yes.
She's a luminous
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
in this film.
Yeah.
And she's part of this extraordinary tableau of disturbed people. A kind of microcosm of Germany, perhaps,
Yes.
at that time,
Yeah, yeah.
post-war. And then we get to this extraordinarily controversial final shot. Janowitz felt betrayed because the doctor, who is the real version of Caligari, says, "Oh, it's all right, I know how to cure him. Now that I realise who he thinks I am, I can cure him." And Siegfried Krauss followed this line, saying, "The doctor is all," I think he used the phrase, "all mildness." The doctor is all mildness. But how mild is this deeply troubling scene?
I know, yes.
Of a voice being suppressed in a straitjacket, exactly mimicking the action that had happened with Caligari himself.
Of course, that's right.
Before, and in the same room. And of course, it's the same crazy-looking room, indicating that real life is just as crazy as Francis's delusions.
Yeah.
And then there's that strange little narcissistic moving
sweeping
the hair
back of the
aside.
hair. Yeah.
And we get this unreadable, but I think, because unreadable, so sinister, iris in on his face.
Yeah.